Hey guys, welcome to Muscle Mini Lecture number 2. We're going to start out today with some basic characteristics of muscle cells. So muscle cells are going to be excitable. Muscle cells are excitable. What that means is that muscle cells can conduct action potentials. It doesn't mean they're like easily excited like a Labrador, okay? It means they can conduct action potentials. They can send action potentials. All right, number 2, muscle cells are contractile. That means they can contract, obviously. That means they can powerfully shorten. I mean, contraction is a shortening of something, but is generally done with speed, with power. Number 3, muscles are extensible. We can stretch them. Another word for stretchy. Lastly, muscles are elastic. When we stretch them and we let go, they snap back. So gum, for example, is extensible, but it's not really elastic. Cactus mint. What a great flavor. Rubber bands, on the other hand, are not only extensible, they are also elastic. So these are 4 basic characteristics of muscle cells. All right, some basic functions of muscle cells. Number 1, the most obvious one, muscle cells let us fly. Well, they do. Let's simplify that, though. Muscle cells let us move. Muscle cells help maintain the correct position for our body. In other words, muscle cells are important for posture. Muscles are going to stabilize joints. That shoulder joint is a ball and socket joint. We met the 4 muscles of the rotator cuff in lab. One of their jobs is to stabilize that joint. And lastly, muscle cells make heat. Muscle cells do some thermogenesis. That's what that says, thermogenesis. All right. Let's keep on going now that we got some basic functions. We're now going to look at the general structure of skeletal muscle. Notice that we are going to start at the bottom here with a single muscle fiber, aka a single muscle cell. This is one muscle cell right here. We'll deal with these little guys inside soon enough, those little components. But this thing in the big circle here is one muscle cell. Muscle cells are grouped together into a bundle called a fascicle. We saw this in neurons as well, didn't we? The fascicle is a bundle of muscle fibers. The muscle fibers are attached to one another by some loose connective tissue called the endomysium. Then the fascicle itself is wrapped by a thicker layer of connective tissue called a paramecium. Now notice that the actual muscle itself, this guy right here is the actual muscle itself, it is composed of fascicles. It is a bundle of bundles. And notice there are blood vessels, arteries, veins. There'll be nerves and lymphatics in here as well. And this final muscle is covered, there we go, covered by a dense layer of connective tissue called epimysium. And the epimysium actually becomes the tendon which attaches to our femur in this case. So, a muscle is this organ. It is wrapped up by a connective tissue wrapping called the epimysium, which is continuous with the tendon. Then the muscle itself is a bundle of fascicles. Each fascicle is a bundle of muscle fibers. The fascicle is surrounded by a connective tissue layer called the perimysium, and each muscle fiber or muscle cell is wrapped by a layer called the endomysium. All right. Now, not all muscle cells will have the same amount of these connective tissue wrappings. They will differ. Some skeletal muscles have more connective tissue. Some skeletal muscles have less. let's look at some skeletal muscle in the microscopic view, and we'll see there's a pretty good amount of connective tissue here. I can see my endomysium around my individual muscle cells. Each of these circles right here. Let's draw on it just for fun. Each of these guys right there, that's one muscle cell. The epimysium is the whitish stuff in between them. Let's put like some yellow on it. So this stuff right here, this stuff right here, that's endomysium. Now, this right here is a fascicle, and my yellow line, my big yellow line there, is basically on the paramecium. Notice the paramecium is thicker than the endomysium. And then on the outside, we see the epimysium. The epimysium is much, much broader, much, much thicker, much denser. Okay, good. If I look at this muscle here, do you think this particular muscle had a lot of epimysium and paramecium and endomysium, or not very much? That's my question for you. All right, we mentioned that the epimysium does come together and form the tendon. And we see a tendon here, and we see a tendon here. The epimysium can also turn into an aponeurosis. An aponeurosis. You met that term when you were doing the muscles of the skull, because you met the aponeurosis that attaches the two bellies of the epicranius muscles. So an aponeurosis is like a flat, like a sheet-like tendon. Now, those tendons and aponeuroses, they are going to lead to my bony attachments. And so in this case, we have the biceps brachii here. This is the biceps brachii. And we can see its origin on the coracoid process of the scapula, on the rim of the glenoid fossa. So that origin is the less mobile bony attachment. And then we can see it inserting down here on the tuberosity of the radius. The insertion is the more mobile bony attachment. All right. We mentioned earlier, it was really in the last lecture, that skeletal muscle cells are called skeletal muscle fibers because they're long and skinny. I mean, how long can one of these muscle cells be? If you think about the distance from your front pocket, like if you have a pocket on your pants or shorts, from that front pocket to the inside of your knee, that distance, so it might be a little bit longer than, fingertip to elbow. Probably a little bit longer than that, depends on your proportions. But that is how long a single skeletal muscle cell or fiber can be. And you might wonder, well, how do cells get so long? Do they just grow long? Well, no. In the embryo, there are going to be skeletal muscle cells called myoblasts. Remember we meant osteoblasts, fibroblasts, chondroblasts? These are myoblasts, literally muscle maker. In the embryo, myoblasts fuse together. And that fact that many cells fuse together to make one cell is one of the major reasons why these skeletal muscle cells end up so long. It also accounts for the fact that skeletal muscle cells are multinucleate. They have a lot of nuclei. And of course, there's a word for this. When many cells fuse to make one, that is known as a syncytium. So skeletal muscle fibers are an example of a syncytium because many cells have fused to make one. Syn, S-Y-N, means together, then the C-Y-T part is cell, so it's a together cell. And this accounts for the multinucleate nature of our skeletal muscle cells and the fact that we refer to these guys with the word fiber. All right, on that note, we will stop mini lecture number 2, and I will see you guys next time.